Today we're jumping into a really fascinating story of leadership, resilience, and, well, vision. We're drawing directly from our source material. Excerpts from Ibrahim Traoré, A Leader's Journey. Our mission, basically, is to trace this path, right? From a small village in Burkina Faso all the way to the highest office. We want to understand what the source suggests really shapes a leader, especially under tough circumstances, and maybe what insights you can take away from it all.
And I think that's so valuable. Looking at a life like Traoré's as presented here, it's more than just, dates and events. It's really a study in how things like background, key experiences, and having a clear vision kind of mesh together.
Yeah.
It helps us grasp that interplay between where you start and, well, the kind of leader you become.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Where does the source start this story, the roots?
Exactly. It starts in Coup. That's a village in the northern province of Burkina Faso. And the source, it paints this picture, dusty, no electricity, no running water, very grounded.
Sets the scene. And his parents. The source mentions them specifically.
It does. It emphasizes this kind of dual foundation. His father, a farmer, so he learned discipline, from the land, but his mother was a school teacher, so there's also wisdom from books. This mix, right from the beginning, feels pretty important for what comes later.
That blend, yeah, it seems foundational. But then something dramatic happens when he's quite young.
Yes, the source really pinpoints this. He's just 14. And he actually witnesses government soldiers clashing with local rebels, like right there in his own village.
Wow, imagine seeing that.
Exactly. The powerlessness, the conflict.
Right
on your doorstep.
And the source connects that moment directly to a decision he made.
It does. It wasn't just something he saw. It was like the spark.
Yeah.
The source says he vowed that day, right then, never to be powerless again. That single event seems to have really focused his determination.
A powerful motivator, which led him, after secondary school.
Well, given that vow, the next step makes a lot of sense, actually. He passed the national entrance exam for the Burkina Military Academy.
Okay.
And the source describes this as, an elite place for the nation's brightest. So his village background didn't hold him back academically.
And how did they see him there? At the academy, this quiet kid with this intense vow.
Interesting. The source quotes his instructors. They described him as silent but calculating.
Calculated.
A born leader. So it wasn't about being loud or flashy. It was this internal, thoughtful quality that stood out.
That quality must have helped him move up quickly. The source details a pretty fast military career.
It did. That discipline, that calculating nature, it earned him quick promotions. By just 26, he was commanding a special border patrol unit.
And this was during a difficult time?
Oh, absolutely. Right at the height of the Sahel insurgency. The source suggests this was, complex, asymmetric threats, stuff that needed more than just standard military answers.
Which fits with his tactics, right? The source says he wasn't just about using force.
Exactly. Highlights his preference for intelligence gathering over just raw power and using diplomacy whenever possible. Kind of hints at that blend again, doesn't it? Principle and practicality, looking for the smartest way, not just the strongest.
And he built loyalty, not by ordering people around, but by being with them.
Yes, the source really makes a point of this. How he earned respect. By sharing the exact same conditions, eating the same food, sleeping on the same ground.
That must have meant a lot.
In that kind of high-stakes environment, yeah. Where trust is everything. That built a really deep personal bond. It went beyond just rank.
There's a quote the source mentions from a leaked journal from one of his officers.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. It says, Traoré doesn't just fight battles, he solves them.
Solves them. It's different.
It really is. It suggests, a strategic mind, focused on the outcome, the underlying problem, even in the middle of a fight. Like he was already thinking about how to stop the next fight.
And that reputation, the solver, it started to spread.
It did. The source notes his leadership really made a difference in key border towns. Captain Traoré, the name started echoing across the country, not just as a soldier, but, as the source puts it, almost like a symbol of unity when things were really falling apart.
Okay, so he's building this incredible military career, this reputation, and then the story takes a turn the source says was, well, surprising.
Yeah, at age 32, after all that success, he resigned from the military.
Just walked away.
Just walked away. Shocked the establishment, apparently, especially given the influence he must have had by then.
And his reason, the source gives his explanation.
It does, and it's very telling. He said, a gun can protect a village, but a vision can protect a generation.
Wow.
According to the source, that quote really marks this huge shift in his thinking. Not rejecting the military, but realizing the country's problems needed, well, more than just guns. Protecting the future meant something bigger.
So what did that vision look like in practice? What was the next step after leaving the military?
Well, the source says within just 2 years, he formed a political movement, the People's Renewal Front.
Okay.
So taking that vision straight into the political arena. And it had a really clear focus. Anti-corruption, youth empowerment, and food security, fundamental stuff. Addressing the root causes of why things were unstable.
And his slogan, the source mentions a simple one.
Yeah, build from the root.
Yeah, from the root.
It echoes his own background, right? Learning from the land. And it lines up perfectly with focusing on those basic needs, tackling problems where they start.
The source gives some important context here about the state of Burkina Faso at the time.
Oh yeah, the country was really struggling. Years of economic mess, internal conflict, the kind of stuff he'd seen in the military, and just this deep, widespread distrust of, well, everyone in charge.
So people were desperate for something different.
Desperate for change, yeah. Looking for a leader who felt real, authentic.
And his particular background, it kind of hit the mark.
It really did. His military past gave him credibility on security, right? People felt he could handle tough situations. But then his message focused on everyday problems, food, jobs for young people, clean government. It gave him huge grassroots support. He wasn't just another politician,
So when he gets onto the national stage, like in the debates, how did he come across?
The source notes his demeanor really stood out. In all the chaos and shouting, his calm, confident style was, well, compelling. It projected stability, thoughtfulness, qualities people were really craving.
And the election results showed that connection.
Absolutely. The source points to a record 78% voter turnout. That's huge. Shows people were engaged, they wanted change. And Traoré won big 62% of the vote, a landslide.
A clear mandate.
Definitely. It was like, okay, the people have spoken.
And just like that, the captain who solved battles is now the commander-in-chief, tasked with solving the nation's problems.
Like a huge leap. And the source is very clear. The presidency he inherited was tough. He walked right into a crisis.
What were the immediate challenges?
Well, the national budget was deep in the red. Teachers were on strike, which hits that protecting a generation idea hard. And rebels in the East, they hadn't disarmed. Still active conflict.
Not small problems.
No, interconnected crises, all needing action, like yesterday.
And his first big move as president, the source says it was bold and aligned with that build from the root idea.
It really set the tone.
Yeah.
He drastically cut government salaries, including his own, by 40%.
40%.
Yeah. And it wasn't just symbolic. The source notes the money saved was immediately redirected, specifically to build rural hospitals and schools.
Right to the grassroots.
Exactly. Investing in people and basic infrastructure, using resources from the top.
That couldn't have been universally popular, surely.
No, the source definitely acknowledges pushback, doubters. And some elites, the ones who like the old system, they apparently tried to sabotage him. Shaking things up like that is never easy.
But despite that resistance, the source shows progress, tangible results over time.
The numbers mentioned are pretty striking. School attendance up 45% in 3 years. That's huge. Direct result of investing in schools, dealing with the strike. Infant mortality dropped by half. Suggests the new hospitals, maybe better food security, were working. And significantly, Burkina Faso hosted its first national peace summit, with rebel leaders actually at the table.
Applying that solving approach to national reconciliation.
Seems like it. Trying to address the root causes of the conflict, not just fight it.
And his leadership started getting noticed outside Burkina Faso, too.
It did. The source mentions him meeting world leaders, leading trade talks with neighbors in West Africa, pushing for climate resilience programs across the Sahel region. So thinking regionally, tackling shared problems, building bridges internationally.
Speaking of building bridges, maybe his biggest legacy, according to the source.
Yeah, the Traoré Youth Corps.
Yeah.
A massive national service program. It's seen as a huge investment in that generation he talked about protecting, trained over 200,000 young people so far.
And focused on skills for the future, skills that tie into build from the root.
Precisely. Agriculture, clean energy, digital tech, skills for sustainable development, food security, economic growth, connecting the country. It's like implementing that core idea on a huge scale through the youth.
There's another quote the source uses to capture his approach about connection.
Right. He once said, "We inherited borders, but we must build bridges.
Build bridges.
And the source presents this as his core philosophy, connecting different regions inside the country, connecting generations to the youth core, connecting different viewpoints through dialogue.
And his personal style, even now, it reflects that.
Apparently so.
Huh.
He's in his second term now, and the source knows he still lives in his modest home in Wuganra, the capital. Still avoids the big presidential convoy unless it's absolutely necessary. It reinforces that image of a leader who's still connected to the ground level.
So the overall takeaway from the source material seems pretty clear.
Yeah, it concludes that, whether you agree with every single policy or not, the source portrays Ibrahim Traoré as more than just a standard politician. He's shown as a leader really driven by purpose, a purpose forged way back in his youth by that vow.
It really is quite a journey laid out in these sources. From that village seeing conflict all the way to leading a nation through chaos. We've seen how that early mix of discipline and wisdom set a base, how that vow became a driving force, how military problem solving got scaled up into national strategy.
Sure.
That big shift from soldier to statesman, driven by this vision for a generation, and then seeing that vision put into practice, focusing on those really fundamental needs.
And what strikes me is how consistent it all feels, that focus on the root, blending the practical with the visionary, that drive to actually solve things fundamentally. It seems like a continuous thread from his childhood right through his presidency, according to the source.
So something for you listening to think about. Traoré's path is unusual, right? From military discipline, solving tactical problems on the ground, to then facing the massive, messy chaos of governing a whole nation. And his approach, as the source describes it, emphasizes building from the root basics like health, education, unity. So how might that intense, high-stakes military background, especially the focus that the source highlights on solving problems and earning trust from the ground up, how might that uniquely prepare someone for the, equally high-stakes complexity of leading a country in crisis? What does his story, as we've explored it from this source, really suggest about where leadership skills are forged, maybe in places we don't always expect?